Hello, all you couch detectives. Welcome to the Couch Detectives podcast. We cover some of the wildest true crime cases out there, so if you enjoy the way that we do things, consider following. We have a lot planned moving forward. We have other types of true crime content, so for all things Couch Detectives, visit our website at couchdetectivestv.com. Okay, enough rambling, let's get into it. So, this case has recently made some headlines, and for good reason. We wanted to go ahead and break it down for you on this episode of Couch Detectives. The Zizian Group. Have you heard of this? Well, strap in because this is certainly an odd one with quite a few curveballs. 34-year-old Jack Lasota leads a group of a few dozen followers known as the ZIZIANS. Jack is a transgender woman that goes by the name Ziz, hence the name ZIZIANS. And if you don't know what a Zizian is, don't worry. Nobody does. But we're going to educate you on what they claim to be. Don't worry, we will keep it short. The Zizians are a group of vegan anarchists that originated in the Silicon Valley in California. The group is a small offshoot of the rationalist community with some unique beliefs. They believe that the different hemispheres of the brain can actually have different genders and conflicting interests. Which to me seems a little strange, but what do I know? Jack Lasota, or Ziz, also recommended the practice of unihemispheric sleep, or UHS, to the members of the group. UHS is a form of sleep deprivation. One member of the group allegedly offed themselves during a period of practicing UHS. But Ziz made sure to let everyone know that the practice had been carried out incorrectly. So, who is this Jack Lasota, or Ziz character? We will just call them Ziz from here on out. Ziz got their degree in computer science back in 2013 from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And according to their blog, yep, they were a blogger, they moved to San Francisco, California in 2016. Ziz then got heavily involved in the rationalist movement, which is essentially people who base their opinions and actions on reason and knowledge rather than on religious beliefs or emotional response. Nothing inherently wrong with that. Rationalists were popular in the Silicon Valley at the time, and maybe they still are. I really have no idea. In any case, Ziz began blogging using the alias Ziz, which I can only assume is the origin of the group's name. Well, Ziz quickly fell out of the good graces with other rationalist groups, as their writings got very bizarre and very extreme. Ziz also took on beliefs that differed from most rationalists and therefore started to distance themselves from the community. One of Ziz's rants included text like this, quote, "I realized that I was no longer able to stand people, not even rationalists anymore. And I would live out the rest of my life completely alone, hiding my reaction to anyone it was useful to interact with. I had given up my ability to see beauty so I could see evil." End quote. Things certainly seemed to have taken a dark turn for Ziz, but things would get much, much darker as time goes on. Despite all of this, Ziz was able to build a following of people that shared similar beliefs or that resonated with what Ziz was cooking up in their writings. These people mostly consisted of younger, transgender computer scientists that were interested in the rationalist community, but also believed in veganism very strongly. And over the next several years, Ziz and others would move around the country living on boats, staying on land owned by others, mostly in RVs and box trucks, vans, things like that. And in 2019, Ziz and 3 other Zizians were arrested while holding a protest outside of an event held by a rationalist organization that they took issue with. The last posts on Ziz's blog date from around this time. A warrant was actually issued for Ziz when they failed to attend a court hearing related to that arrest. Here is where things get a little more interesting when it comes to Ziz. Upon that warrant being issued, Ziz's lawyer told law enforcement that Ziz was no longer alive. They had apparently died in a tragic boating accident in the San Francisco Bay Area, and their body was never recovered. There was even an obituary posted for Ziz, or Jack Lasota, in an Alaskan newspaper. But believe it or not, Ziz was not killed in a boating accident in San Francisco. Ziz was still alive and would not be laying low for very long. Ziz and their group of angry computer geeks were only getting started. Not long after the obituary was published, Ziz resurfaced in Vallejo, California, along with several other members of the Zizian Group. They, of course, were living in box trucks, vans, and RVs on a land owned by an 81-year-old man at the time named Curtis Lynn. The group had been living on Lynn's property since November of 2019. And according to an interview from Curtis Lynn, he had met the group through a local boating community where he sold them an anchor. The relationship with their landlord would take quite a dramatic turn when in March of 2020, the group simply stopped paying rent to live on Lynn's land. It is said that this was due to the pandemic, which was certainly not uncommon at the time for tenants to stop paying rent to their landlords. The Zizians ended up owing Lynn a grand total of roughly $60,000 in back rent, and Curtis Lynn would not take this lying down. In October of 2022, Lynn was able to secure a court judgment for the Zizians to pay that back rent. Now, when he went through the process of evicting the Zizians from his land, they were not going to go quietly. On November 13th, 2022, Curtis Lynn was viciously attacked on his land. Now, there were various accounts of what took place that day, but from Curtis Lynn's own account, he was approached by 21-year-old Suri Dow about a water leak on the property. And when he went to inspect that leak, he was ambushed by 3 Zizian members with swords and knives. Suri Dow, 27-year-old Somni Legencia, and 31-year-old Emma Bohanian. Lynn was impaled with that sword and stabbed multiple times. Curtis Lynn lost consciousness and awoke to being surrounded by the 3 cult members. Now, Curtis only survived this incident when he was able to pull out his gun and fire at his attackers. He struck 2 of them. Emma Bohanian was struck and killed in the incident, while 27-year-old Somni Legencia was struck by the gunfire in this attack but did survive, likely because they were wearing body armor. After an investigation, Curtis Lynn's actions were deemed to be self-defense, and thankfully he was not convicted of any crimes from the incident. But you just never know these days. Curtis Lynn did spend a month in the hospital for his injuries. He had roughly 50 puncture wounds, he lost his right eye, and of course a sword wound that went through his chest, nearly hitting his heart. He actually walked away from the incident that day, and he was able to make it to a neighbor's house to get help. At 81 years old, Curtis Lynn was a tough cookie. The 2 surviving Zizian members, Suri Dow and Somni Legencia, were arrested and charged with attempted murder. Both of these cult members were also charged with the murder of their fallen accomplice, Emma Bohanian, under the Provocative Act murder doctrine. Both Dow and Legencia are still in police custody, awaiting trial. Both suspects have attempted to escape custody on separate occasions. Now, Ziz was actually on the scene during this attack, but miraculously was not charged with any crimes. But it did seem that the Zizian Group was escalating into a more and more violent nature. This was likely their first taste of blood. The following month, on December 31st, 2022, 71-year-old Richard Zako and his wife 69-year-old Rita were found deceased in their home in Chester Heights, Pennsylvania. Both of them were shot in the head. The Zakos were the parents of a Zizian member, 32-year-old Michelle Zako. And Michelle was questioned a few weeks later in January of 2023. She was briefly detained by police, but was never charged with a crime. Apparently, there was lack of evidence linking them to the homicide, so police had to let her go. Of course, Ziz was also involved in this and was arrested and charged in the incident, but not for murder or anything even remotely close. Ziz was charged with obstructing law enforcement and disorderly conduct. Now, with obvious links to these 2 attacks and an apparent ascension into violence, the Zizians did manage to stay out of the public eye for a few years. That is until January of 2025. Remember Curtis Lynn, the man they attacked back in 2022? Well, he ended up getting murdered on the 17th of January 2025. Vallejo Police Department say that he was stabbed to death by an assailant wearing a mask and a black beanie. Police would later arrest a man named Maximilian Snyder, a 22-year-old data scientist. He was charged with the murder of Curtis Lynn. Now, Lynn was set to be the sole eyewitness and certainly the prosecution's key witness in the Suri Dow and Somni Legencia trial that was scheduled in April of 2025. Detectives say that Snyder killed Lind in order to prevent him from testifying in that trial, which makes a lot of sense to me. But the Zizians were not done yet. Just a few days later, about 3,000 miles away in Coventry, Vermont, Border Patrol agent 44-year-old David Chris Mayland pulled over a vehicle about 20 miles or 32 kilometers from the Canadian border. In that vehicle were two Zizians, Teresa Youngblood and Felix Bauchelt. This would be no routine traffic stop for the agent. A firefight would ensue between the Zizians and Agent Mayland, which unfortunately resulted in Chris Mayland being struck and killed by gunfire. A little bit about Agent Mayland. He served 6 years in the Air Force as a security forces journeyman, where he received many awards and honors. Some of those included the Air Force Achievement Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Armed Force Services Medal, Global War on Terrorism Medal, and the NATO Medal. He then moved to the State Department, where he was recently honored with 15 years of service with the federal government. He actually worked security at the Pentagon during the 9/11 attacks. Chris Mayland was stationed in Vermont as a Border Patrol agent back in 2019, and he was actually known to use the phrase, "serve others before serving yourself," which is a motto that he lived by. I'm telling you all of this because, after such a life of service, for it to end in such a way, by such cowardly individuals, is just a sad state of affairs. Chris Mayland was laid to rest at Fort Snelling National Cemetery on February 22nd, 2025. He's survived by both of his parents, his brother, and his fiancée. Now back to these cult members. Felix Bauchelt was a German citizen and went by the alias Ophelia. Ophelia was also killed in the incident after being struck by return fire from Agent Mayland. Teresa Youngblood, also known as Milo, was wounded in the gunfight but did survive. And Milo was later arrested on firearms charges and has since pleaded not guilty. They are currently in custody. An interesting twist in this incident is that the gun used to kill Agent Mayland was actually bought by Michelle Zako, the daughter of the couple killed back in December of 2022 by the Zizians. This actually led to a wider hunt by law enforcement for the members of the Zizian Group, because after the shootout in Vermont, police say they uncovered new evidence about the murder of the Zakos, and they were on the lookout for both Ziz and Michelle Zako. Apparently Ziz had failed to appear in several court hearings along the way as well. That manhunt would actually end on February 16th, 2025, when Michelle and Ziz were arrested in Maryland, along with another Zizian member, 26-year-old Daniel Blank. The three were actually found on a Frostburg, Maryland property, about 160 miles or 260 kilometers northwest of Washington, D.C. A man had called police, saying that he wanted help getting three suspicious people off of his property after they parked two box trucks and asked to camp on his land for a month. Upon arresting these scoundrels, they were all dressed in black. Two of them wore gun belts holding ammunition, and officers found a rifle and a handgun in the box truck. Michelle Zako actually resisted officers and was taken to the ground, and she was also found to have a handgun on her person. Maryland State Police said the three were charged with trespassing and obstruction, and that Ziz and Zako were additionally charged with weapons violations as they had handguns in the vehicle. Now, after a bond hearing, the judge acknowledged that they were flight risks, and certainly a threat to society if they were not kept in custody. So all three suspects were denied bail. Ziz's lawyer declined to speak to the press about this case, but made a statement for the media and the public to refrain from speculation and premature conclusions. Even though law enforcement have not offered a lot of information regarding the ongoing investigations in this case, interviews, court records, and online postings paint quite a story here. This group of young, highly intelligent computer scientists, they met online, they all shared extreme anarchist beliefs, and ultimately became increasingly violent. And all of this has continued to reveal a very tangled web of shocking violence and really a connect-the-dot relationship within the group. And while nobody has been charged with the murders of the Zako family on New Year's Eve of 2022, more and more evidence seemed to be linking these murders with the Zizians. So this is where we stand now. Many arrested, many dead in the wake of a very unclear message and extreme actions. There will surely be more information on this situation in the future, and we will do our best to bring that to you. Make sure you're following. We have more cases like this on the way, and we have a lot planned for the podcast moving forward, and we hope to see you in the next one. As always, visit couchdetectivestv.com to stay in the loop with all of our true crime content, and stay safe out there.